almost 12 months back, you approached thinking that the hotel you got for Launceston people and and 2 3 months back again, you think it will be okay there. I have to say that hope so will be working for that will be good for Launceston people, good for Council and good for us. Thank you, and please repeat that.
No, I think everyone heard that. Were you all okay? They all understood it, Joe?
Okay.
Yeah, it was very good.
Okay.
So, Dean Cocker, are you speaking?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, councillors. Dean Cocker, 9 Spencer Street. I speak in support of the proposal. As Chloe Line said, the JOC group is comfortable with the proposed minor changes, removing the word landmark from landmark buildings, just so it refers to buildings, and also the other change that there not be an unreasonable impact. And we think that that's good, because any change will have some impact, whether it's good or bad or small or large. So that's a reason. That's something that we agree to. The cable car in Hobart attracted 1,500 objections. What we have here is around 60-odd representations, of which almost half, 25, were basically a cut and paste of one of the representors, Jim Collier's representation. We think that, 2 or 3 dozen objections out of a city and surrounds of around 100,000 means that this is not as controversial as perhaps it's being painted. It will be positive for the area. The area in particular is not a heritage precinct. There's no reason why it shouldn't be improved with a development like this, and why future development should be constrained to the fact that there's car parks and relatively low quality buildings in that area. So we encourage the council to support this. There will be hundreds of jobs and for tourism in this and hospitality in this project, and we encourage the council to continue to support it as they did with their original decision. We also think that the Fragrance Group GP Premium Hotels decision has also shown that the tribunal, with 3 different panel members, was prepared to consider a broader surrounding area than just 100 metres, and I think that also means that council can be clear that maybe that Rampat decision may not have been 100%. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers?
I'd like to move an emergency motion. Thank you, Mayor.
No other speakers? Thank you. Yeah, what's that, Councillor Walker?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move an emergency motion that item 9.1 be removed from today's agenda, that the council acknowledge that too many councillors here today have expressed bias in regards to their support of the Gorge Hotel and have conflated these thoughts with this SAP, ruling themselves out of being able to vote on this item today. That council seeks independent professional advice as to whether we can any longer make decisions relating to the site at 123 and 125 to 133 Patterson Street and 270 Brisbane Street, and that council potentially seek an alternative body such as the Tasmanian Planning Commission to make future decisions.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Spencer. CEO, can I have your advice on whether this is a valid motion for the meeting?
Well, what you're proposing is an alternate motion. There's no way that the full breadth of that is able to be considered without advice. Clearly, some of what you've just discussed is not even it's not even considerable at law in terms of the way that the land use planning and approvals system works within the state. So the crux of it is, I think, Mayor, that he's seeking to be able to defer the matter.
Thank you.
Point one is that it be removed from today's agenda.
So that could be considered.
Well, we can consider that first if you'd like, Councillor Walker. That's the motion, that will be removed from today's agenda.
I have to give reasons why.
Oh, I understand that, but I'm just asking if you're happy that we discuss that part of it.
That'll be removed from today's agenda because of conflation of a proposed development and this SAP.
You're happy with that, Councillor Spencer?
Yeah.
Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Walker?
Yes, I do, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, a number of councillors have expressed a clear desire for this hotel to be built, not just during the initial approval of this hotel, but consequently on May 20 this year, when this issue first came to the council, Amendment 66, a specific area planned over the land at Patterson Street and Brisbane Street. It's clear, listening to that audio, that these councillors, and I'm happy to name them as the Mayor, Councillor Dakin, who's not with us today, Councillor Mackenzie, Councillor Harris and Councillor Spencer, who all made specific comments regarding the particular development that is associated with this SAP and their support for that development. Now, I can quite happily provide those quotes, but I suppose, you know, there were a couple of councillors who said, we've already made this decision. This is something that we've already decided as a council, and this is just a mere formality. That's how it was treated. Not only can we not make this decision today because of that bias, we cannot even make a decision about whether we are the ones that should make the decision. That has to come from outside council now. We're too far embroiled in the process to be able to make a decision about our capability of making a decision. We have to seek independent advice, and in all likelihood, we'll now have to either start the process again or hand the process over to a body that can deal with it independently. It'd be the equivalent of approving a planning scheme zone change for somebody because you like the design of their house that they've proposed, or that you admire the developer who's involved. That's the type of decision that's being made here. When it comes to the perceived bias, and I know councillors have commented previously from the last meeting, which I wasn't here, I'm sorry to say, but there was a suggestion of corruption in this building, and I agree with the councillors who responded to that, that is not a good thing when we get to that stage. But I will say that by convoluting the idea of the development with the special area plan, we are corrupting the process. We're not being aware of what we're doing here around this table, which is merely discussing a strategic plan for the future of Launceston. Now, I haven't heard much of that discussion today. I heard a little from the representation of Susie Kai, where she talked about the strategic development of the area and how that can be and should be developed. But this is not the way to develop that, and certainly not when we have a number of councillors, and I'm quite happy to put that on the record, and I'm quite happy to pursue that further, a number of councillors who have expressed clear and definite bias in this process. So, in that sense, I think it would be sage for councillors to put this particular planning decision on hold from today until we can get some clear and independent advice as to how we can proceed. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. This is a procedural matter. On that basis, we now put it to the vote, but I thought I'd give you the opportunity to explain yourself.
I was hoping that you did. Thank you, Mayor.
Well, thank you. So now those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. Those against? So that's lost. Thank you. So we'll now go back to the original motion. 9.1. Someone happy to move 9.1? Councillor Mackenzie. Is there a seconder? Councillor Harris. Do you wish to speak? Yes, he does.
Thanks, Mayor. I firstly express disappointment that this has been brought to the table in the way that it has been in relation to the previous motion. given that we've had some number of weeks for that to have been discussed at council chamber to determine whether there was perceived bias or not. So I'll just express that as a comment in relation to it. But we're here today to speak to an amendment to the planning scheme, and I'll make no bones about the fact that when the DA was put up, it was recommended by the officers of the council, and I supported it. And when the planning scheme amendment came to this council chamber, I may have made some comments in relation to the fact that I supported the previous motion, and I did, but I was also happy that it went out for public examination once we approved it to do so. So that's been out in the public arena. There have been 61 representations that have come back in. One, I think, came back in a positive light. A number of them were very similar in nature, and as stated by one of the speakers, may have been copy and pasted from a previous representation in relation to the matter. Whether I have a perceived bias or not, I'll leave that for others to determine. All I know is that we have put it out for representation to the community. There have been representations come back. Our officers have then considered those representations, summarised the issues that were in relation to those, and given us their views in relation to that, on which we are being asked to make a decision as to whether to send it on to the Planning Commission. Noting that at the end of this process, it will go to the Planning Commission, and they will be the ultimate arbiters in relation to whether this planning scheme amendment actually gets up or it doesn't. So ultimately there is another level, so if there is perceived bias, they'll determine that and deal with it in that manner at that point in time, I would imagine. It seems to me the key issues in relation to, it's difficult because we're talking about a planning scheme amendment and not a development application, because you actually don't have a development application to consider here today, but a number of issues were raised in relation to the visual impact, height and scale and bulk, and also it's referenced the Cataract Gorge itself. There were others that related in relation to the circumvention of the tribunal's decision in making moving the goalposts in making this decision. So there have been a number of those sorts of things, but I thought it was worth looking at and just reading the officer's response in relation to a number of those things, and I think it's probably best just to read it rather than to try and paraphrase it. Compliance with the existing planning scheme is not a requirement for consideration of amendments. The purpose of the amendments is to make a change to the planning scheme to allow a form of development that would otherwise not be allowable. When Council, acting as a planning authority, approved the previous application for the Gorge Hotel, considered the proposal against the provisions of the planning scheme, and relevantly considered the proposed hotel compatibility with the streetscapes and the character of the surrounding areas. The tribunal ultimately determined that because the height of the proposed tower element was significantly taller than the existing development on the site and the surrounding area, it could not be seen as compatible. This narrowly framed decision was unexpected and sets up a situation where, to comply with the existing planning scheme, the development needs to be of similar scale and character to its surroundings. The area of the amendment site and its surroundings are objectively low urban quality, including car parks, car yards, the Margaret Street wall of Launceston College and the petrol station. It is not considered strategically desirable for the new development of this well-located, strategically important site to be of similar scale and character to the existing arrangements or developments. It is considered that the preferable strategic direction is to allow new developments to make beneficial change to the area and establish a new character that has capacity to bring a new and more intense urban development and increased levels of activity. The primary purpose of the amendment is therefore to facilitate a different scale of building. It is important to note the Tribunal's decision was not a first principles assessment of whether the proposal was acceptable, but a limited assessment as to whether it was compatible with the surrounding streetscape against the performance criteria. The submissions to the amendment appear to be extending the scope of the Tribunal's decision to suggest that the Tribunal considered the building generally inappropriate. This is not the case. In reality, it's concluded because the tower was taller than the surrounding development, it was not compatible and therefore not compliant with the scheme. So they are the reasons why the Tribunal did what it did according to our officers. I take on board those comments, and in my view, am I happy with the way that the current streetscape is? Do I love a service station on the corner of Margaret and Patterson Street? No, I don't. I think it's an ugly blight, to be quite frank, and a number of the other things, car yards and things like that, I don't think add to the...
Councillor, your time is up. An extension?
I do.
It's moved Councillor Stosniak, seconded Councillor Dawkins. All those in favour? And that's all, councillors. Thank you. You have 3 more minutes.
So as a consequence of that, mine's about improving the amenity of the area and hopefully leading to future development which will actually improve the amenity further down there. And I, at the time, suggested that the Gorge Hotel fitted that compatibility in relation to what I would like to see that area developed as. So I still stand by that conviction. Having read the representations that came in and taken them into consideration in making my decision today. The other matter which was raised, and I guess topically on the basis of what happened in Victoria yesterday, was seismic issues associated with the site. And if I can just quickly again go to our officer's report on that, saying that all relevant environmental hazards have been identified. There are no statutory overlays regarding seismic activities or landslip on the site. Any potential issues relating to the seismic problems would need to be considered should development occur over the site. It is accepted that potential seismic issues are a matter of this property be left to engineers at the time of detailed design. I therefore think those are the major matters in relation to what we're dealing with here today, and I'm very comfortable to support this going forward to the planning scheme for their final arbitration on the matter.
Thank you. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Mackenzie, for that very succinct and very detailed response to most of what I was going to say. I will just leave it with that happy to support this specific area plan amendment. When we had Paul Davies' report, when I first was elected to council 3 years ago, so it was probably in the first 12 months, and there were components of that about the heights of buildings within the CBD. I remember him very clearly saying to us that there were procedures and processes to enable us to allow taller buildings than what the generic guidelines were being provided. I think we had heights of up to 14.5 as an acceptable solution, another one to 24 metres, and a third process for those over 24 metres, which clearly this falls into. So I'm happy that we to support the specific area plan that has a maximum height of 42 metres of that in the tower block only. It is designed to not be domineering, particularly from the Patterson Street street front, as far as the area plan is concerned. We wait to see what the development application will actually look like. But from my point of view, this gives some certainty for the developer to at least proceed to give us a development application so that we can look forward to the redevelopment of that particular area down at Margaret Street and Patterson Street.
Thank you. Any other speakers? No?
I'd like to move an amended motion. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to amend the recommendation that's in front of us today, and I would like to essentially, I suppose, that recommendation 1 can stand. Recommendation 2 would become superfluous because recommendation 3, being that Council currently states that Council will recommend to the Planning Commission that a draft Amendment 66 be approved. I would like to change to that Council cannot make a recommendation to the Tasmanian Planning Commission as to the draft Amendment 66 recommended changes. So we can no longer make a recommendation.
CEO wishes to comment.
Well, my first comment is I'm not clear exactly what the councillor is suggesting, but it seems to be, just correct me if I'm wrong, moving from an approval to a refusal. Is that what?
Well, ultimately it would be a refusal. I suppose we could...
Yeah, so that can't be an amendment.
No, exactly. But I'm just saying that
so
we can no longer...
You can foreshadow that as an alternate motion if this motion were to fail. Yeah. That's probably the best scenario from a procedural point of view.
Mm-hmm.
So no more speakers?
I would like to move an alternate motion. Thank you, Mayor.
No, you can't at the moment. Let's put the motion first, and if it's lost, okay? You weren't listening.
So procedurally, you're able to foreshadow an alternate motion, which you have just done, but you can't consider another motion until this motion is determined. So if this motion were to fail, then you're able to consider your foreshadowed motion.
I wish to propose another alternate motion, Mayor. A second alternate motion.
You haven't moved an alternate motion.
No, there isn't an alternate motion on, but we're dealing with this motion. Unless there's an amendment to the motion, we continue to move on to this.
I wish to amend the emotion. I wish to amend the motion in regards to the proposed height zones for the as it's stated here, the Gorge Hotel special area plan, and I wish to amend the height for Zone D to be reduced to the ranges of Zone C, and for the heights mentioned in Zone C to be reduced to the heights in Zone B. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. Is that an amendment or is that a significant change?
Well, again, it's unclear exactly.
Well,
the regulations require that someone need to have in writing the amendment required.
yeah, I think it's better if we deal with the motion. If that's lost, you can do an alternate motion, Councillor Walker. So, anyone else wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Spencer?
Thanks, Mayor. I'm really on the fence with this one. The Paul Davies report I thought was done fairly well with the heights. I've just got a couple of issues. If this was 2 stories lower, I think there wouldn't be any public outrage about it. The second one is the developers and engineers will have to know about this earthquake dramas that happened in Melbourne. It could happen here. With climate change, it is a worry. The developers tell me they need 150 rooms for someone to take this on. So that's probably why they need the height. And the 5-star motel is probably justified in Launceston, as we haven't got no real high-class motels. I'm really on the fence. I don't know which way to go. I'm a tradie, and for local tradies, tourism and jobs, I probably will support it. But it's a hard one because of the height. And coming off the new bridge from Riverside, there's nothing in the report about the photos of that, what it's going to look like. But for the tradies of Launceston, I probably will support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Dawkins?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I think there's absolutely no doubt that this has been quite a messy process for us. If we'd started here, rather than have the DA come to council in the first instance, I don't think we'd be here. I think we'd be a lot further down the track, and I think there's a reasonable acknowledgement of that. I'd like to acknowledge the council's passion in this area. There's no doubt that Councillor Walker has significant interest in the cultural and heritage values of the city, and, you know, in every heritage city in the world, there's somebody speaking with this voice who I believe deserves to be listened to. Whether this is the right process and the right way to go about it, I'm on the fence, but I certainly think that the representations have reflected that same passion. I would have certainly, when we first talked about the SAP, I spoke to wanting to understand the consultation process and hearing back from our community about how they felt about this development. And unfortunately, we didn't hear back from more than one person on how they feel positively about the development. But does that mean that our community doesn't want development in this space? I don't believe it does. I believe that the 60 or so people who have taken the time to put pen to paper or their fingers to the keyboard should be listened to. Whether it's a cut and paste doesn't really matter to me. I think what matters is that they've taken the time to get in touch with this process and say, you know, I do have an opinion. As I stated the first time we debated this, I do believe from the councillor's recommendations and the discussions that we've had that this is the good place. This is an excellent place in our city for a development, for a bulky development of this nature. It's wedged in a difficult spot. There's a lot of traffic. That corner itself absolutely needs to change. There's no doubt about it. Whether or not, once we continue this process, that the Planning Commission adopts this recommendation, to this amendment, and then we go on and debate again the development application and we do see a large hotel there, we're a way away from that yet. We're still stuck in the middle of this process and we need to see what's going to happen next. I feel like Councillor Walker's tried to railroad us today and I really don't appreciate that. I came in with the idea that I'd listen to the representations and make a decision based on that consultation. I am going to vote in support of the recommendation to go to the Planning Commission. And as I said, it would be good to hear from a wider group in our community at times like this, because sometimes we feel like we're left here hanging.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll start with a few questions, if I may. In the responses that are listed here by our planning officers, there's a number of key issues that are summarised from the representatives that have a response. Now, one of those is to the visual impact on Cataract Gorge entrance in West Launceston. The officer's response says that the subject site, being located approximately 320 metres east of the eastern entrance to the Cataract Gorge, this modelling illustrates that the envelope will not significantly impact upon the entrance of the gorge or the residents of West Launceston. But isn't it true that this location and this bulk of this proposed special area plan would have a significant impact on a large amount of people in Launceston who currently enjoy views to the gorge from all over, especially the southern side of our city, on in a range of areas?
Richard, or sorry?
It's difficult to be able to answer that question, Councillor, because really that's your perspective. So you've just provided your view. Obviously, the professional advice has been, as is stated in the agenda, and really all we can do is reiterate that advice in answer to your question.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, it says that the envelope will not significantly impact upon the entrance to the gorge, and I'm suggesting that there may be quite a few residents who it would impact visually for them, and I just wanted a response to that.
Already answered.
That's been answered. Do you wish to speak to the item or not?
No, further questions. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
When it comes to the tribunal's decision that the building envelope is out of proportion and character with the surrounding land, I understand that this special area plan, when I say building, I suppose we should talk about the envelope. I understand that this special area plan would override the what do we call it, the streetscape and character provisions that have been sort of current in our interim planning scheme. But how would this special area plan make the building envelope any more in proportion to the surrounding areas?
Richard?
If I think I'm understanding the question correctly, the purpose of this amendment is to allow a change in character. And so if we're saying, almost by definition, if you are taking the tribunal's view of the prior application under the existing planning scheme, its view was it wasn't compatible because the differential in height was so significant. The purpose of this is to allow council to have or to propose or to facilitate or support a future development that would be greater than would be seen as compatible by the tribunal. That's the purpose of it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I certainly understand the purpose. I suppose I was wondering how...
Can you ask another question
well,
or
I
are you going
suppose
to speak?
the question, I'm not sure if it was answered, was that how does this make...
Perhaps you could speak now, Councillor Walker, and then we can...
It's a question as to how this change, this special area plan, makes the envelope more in proportion.
The degree to which it's compatible is referenced to the surrounding buildings. So obviously, for example, and the Fragrance Hotel was mentioned previously, that's a taller hotel. That was seen to be compatible because it was referenced to the things that were around it. Now, the methodology to do that under the Fragrance was a much broader methodology that was supported than the decision in the development application for the Gorge Hotel, which was a much narrower focus. So when you narrow the focus, you narrow it down to the car yards and the car park and the petrol station and the buildings are in the immediate neighbourhood. Now, if you take that narrow view, developing something that is compatible to that can be seen as not strategically desirable because this is a very well located and important development site, and being compatible to those things is not seen to be, or you can have the view that that's not desirable. So allowing a new form of development to emerge that is different to what's surrounding it is the purpose of this. So it's a case of trying to be more de-link the necessity that the tribunal sought to be similar to what was around it and allow a new character to emerge.
Thank you. Another question, if I can, Mayor. And it's good that you mentioned the strategic approach of the council. What is our strategic plan? I know that one councillor mentioned the Paul Davies report, which was a building height survey. Of course, part of a long process that this council has gone through since before my time on council to try and find some consensus in the community. So in the scheme of that long process, including the Davies report, and including also work that we are doing from that report in terms of special area plans, specific area plans for Launceston CBD, how does this particular special area plan fit in and dovetail with those?
Richard.
That question was answered in the report that initiated this amendment. So the basic strategic compliance with the Northern Regional Land Use Strategy, Council Strategic Plan, was done in the report when Council initiated this amendment. I don't have that report to hand, but the compliance with those strategic documents was outlined as the basis for initiation of this report. Obviously, this report here is about considering the representations, which is a different matter, but I could refer you back to the report that initiated the amendment where that's all set out.
I mean, I'm aware that we haven't yet adopted the...
You're speaking now, thank you.
I'm asking another question, thank you, Mayor. I'm aware that we haven't yet adopted any of those recommendations formally from Professor Paul Davies' report, which is, essentially about a building height survey and recognising that Launceston is a low-rise city. So, having predicated that, is it the case that allowing a building that clearly sits outside even those recommendations at present, even though they're not been adopted, isn't it the case that that then obviously leads to other proposals being able to be justified by allowing the bulk of this special area plan to proceed?
Richard?
Well, honestly, I don't believe it's outside the Paul Davies recommendations. I think Paul set up a system where taller buildings could be considered, and the Margaret Street corridor was one of the areas of town where he considered greater height was capable of existing because of its character and because of where it is, because of the large floor plates available. It's one of the few areas of the city that's actually capable of this kind of development. So I believe it is consistent generally with the Paul Davies recommendations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You have to speak now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I suppose I've made my thoughts about this special area plan reasonably clear already, but you know, I'll just remind everyone that that's what we're here to talk about. I'm sure I don't need to do that, but nonetheless, you know, when I'm, you know, hearing about you know, developments in the area and the current state of the area, the service station and things like that, I'm reminded that that's not what we're here for today. That's something that, you know, I'm sure most people would agree is a positive thing for Launceston to see development. The nature of that development, the appropriateness of that development, that's another matter. And to use the spurious argument that because we want to see development in the area, we must therefore approve this particular SAP, I think is you know, not a sound way to convince anybody. I'm certainly quite in favour of seeing that area developed. It's a prime part of Launceston's waterfront. That would be a great thing to see. Doesn't mean that it has to be of the bulk and the scale that's being suggested here today. Not necessarily. Look, you know, I appreciate Councillor Dawkins talking about my passion for this, but certainly it's nothing personal. It's something that obviously a lot of people feel strongly about in this town, as everyone would know. And just because you've got 60 representations doesn't mean that there's not a lot more people out there who feel strongly about this as well. On both sides of the ledger, I'd agree. And quite a lot of people who are probably ambivalent towards it as well. But to go through a process where we ask for people to make their submissions, to say that we're going through a consultation, and then to make disparaging remarks about that, and to say that it's only 60 people, and therefore that it's not to be taken into consideration, I think is an insult to the people of Launceston. And I'm disappointed in anyone who would suggest that. They're people who've gone out of their way to participate in this process, and I see very little response to that. Apart from the acknowledgement that they've done it, I see very little in this recommendation and in the things that have been said today that acknowledge the passion of people of Launceston, people who've lived here all their lives, people who've moved here because of the wonderful low-rise nature of our city. Something that helps to embody our heritage values, something that helps to embody our quality of life, and something that we can easily lose, as many places in the world have, before you've even realised it. But I suppose people are waking up. People are seeing that this effect in other parts of the world. It's one of the great luxuries we have in Tasmania, is being able to reflect upon what we see in other parts of the world and hopefully not make some of those mistakes here. No one is suggesting that this site shouldn't be developed, but it does seem quite odd that we are discussing a special area plan, specific area plan, that just happens to mirror almost exactly a development that has clouded this whole process. This is not the way that it should have been done. We have a process whereby we are looking at specific area plans. That process needs to be concluded and to be added to, including the Market Street precinct, which is not currently included in our specific area plans. That would be a great thing for us to lead that process. But here we're not. We're responding to a process that has been handled back to front and has put us in this difficult position. It's put my fellow councillors in a difficult position where they've conflated the idea of a proposed development with a specific area plan. As I say, if I owned a property and I decided that I wanted to get it rezoned, let's say it's zoned commercially and I want it to be residential, because I've made a nice design, do I bring that to council and you say, oh yeah, we like that house, yeah, we'll rezone it for you. That's not how it works. And that is not how this should have worked here today. And I'm sorry that I've, you know, if councillors are offended, if they feel that I've been unjust in my criticisms, but I'm merely, referring to your own words in the process.
Councillor Walker, do you need an extension?
Yes, please, Mayor.
Move Councillor Harris, second to Councillor Spencer. All those in favour? That's all councillors present. You have 3 more minutes.
So, yes, if there's been some disappointment expressed in the way I've approached this today, maybe that's understandable. I don't take it personally. I think it's been disappointing the way this has been handled for the last 2 years. But I don't hold that against anybody. And I don't expect you to hold this against me the way I've handled this today. It was imperative that I make it clear that councillors around this table are not always aware of their responsibility when it comes to a planning decision. I'm sorry I have to be the one to point that out, and in these circumstances, but that is the way that it is. That is really at the heart of this decision today. Do we approve a specific area plan at the behest of a particular development proposal that may or may not ever get built? We don't know. It may or may not be a 5-star hotel. We don't know. Because it might not even be that development that gets built. And yet councillors around this table have talked about a 5-star development being a great thing for Launceston in relation to this specific area plan. That's the difficulties I'm talking about, and they are the difficulties that I will have to pursue as a matter of course when it comes to this council's decision making around this specific area plan. I won't be supporting it today because I think that the process hasn't been handled clearly. It hasn't given due respect to the process that should be involved when a specific area plan is developed, and I don't believe, as much as people have tried to contribute to the process, have tried to say if there was a few stories less, it'd be a great thing, it would appear there's no avenue for consultation in that regard. There's no avenue for people to pass that message on. I'm not against any particular development in that site. I'm certainly not in favour of the particular height of the proposal of this particular specific area plan. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Priest.
Thank you, Mayor. I just would like to acknowledge the passion in the room about this subject. It came to council when I wasn't a councillor. In regard to the special area plan, I think that I would like to thank the members of the community that have put submissions in. Whether they have cut or pasted or not, I think that it just shows a level of interest. Unfortunately, people are very busy. If it is indeed a cut and paste, then it is acknowledgement of a similar support to other proponents. It is a change in character to the streetscape in Margaret Street, and I am not anti-development in the city. I think that the Gorge Hotel will be a fabulous, fabulous building in that area. Whether it's compatible to the surrounding buildings, well, obviously in the documents that we're provided with, it is subjective. People will say that, yes, they welcome high buildings in the city. Others will say that they don't. I would personally like to see that Building D, I think it is, and Zone D and Zone C be lowered. I think it would be a credit to the developer if they did have a bit of consultation within the community, take on board so that we can all be proud of having input into such a significant development. I would like to see it lower myself. The Paul Davies report, I think, is a valuable document. I would like to see council progress that document. So, unfortunately today, I won't be supporting the SAP, but I would like to see the Gorge Hotel go ahead. but just lower. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Mackenzie, wish to close.
Thanks, Mayor. And if in any way I've been disparaging to the representatives, I apologise if that's who I'm being referred to, because certainly I accept everybody's right to make a contribution to the democracy that we live in, and this is one of the processes. The way I see it is we had a DA that was put before council a number of months, maybe even years ago, in relation to the Gorge Hotel. It was passed by this council. It was then taken to the tribunal. The tribunal then determined that the matter shouldn't pass, and therefore, with conditions, knocked it back. The proponent then came back to council requesting a special area plan. The council officers then went through the process of assessing that special area plan as to whether it was, they deemed it compatible, and therefore brought to the council chamber for us to consider whether it should be put out for public comment. It then came to council chamber for us to have a look at and discuss and hear some representations in relation to that. The council passed it to go to public consultation process, which there was 28 days for which it was put out to council. Those 28 days, 61 representations were received. The officers then took some time to then consider the representations that were made, and therefore then come back to us with responses in relation to all the matters that were raised by the representations and given us advice. And in relation to that advice, they've advised, subject to a couple of minor amendments to the wording in the special area plan, that they recommended that we put it forward to the Planning Commission for their approval. That's where we've got to. I've assessed, reading the information that's been provided through the representations through our council officers listening today, and certainly, as I say, my comments in relation to the way this was brought to the table, Councillor Walker, was just purely, I would have liked to have discussed it before, so we could have worked that out before we sat around the table today, rather than making a big splash about it today. But that's your way, that's fine, and I certainly won't resolve from the fact that we'll have these conversations into the future. But I still haven't been dissuaded with your argument that I shouldn't be supporting this today, and I'll continue to do that, and I'll recommend that to the council chamber.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Those against? That's 2 against. The rest are 4 for those that are at the table. Move on to 9.2. Someone, no speakers for that, so someone happy to move 9.2? Councillor Harris, thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Spencer, thank you. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Harris?
Very briefly, this is just a zoning change to allow use of the land as a hospital in what is clearly a medical and hospital zone, I guess you would say, for those 2 properties on Wellington Street, which is known more commonly as the Hub Medical Centre. So this is just quite a procedural thing to allow that particular use, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer?
Yes, I fully support this. It's a great complex what he's got up there, and it's going to be major for take pressure off the hospital, what they plan, so I'll be fully supporting it. Thank you.
Nothing further to add on that one.
I'll put the motion. Those in favour? All those, that's all councillors present. That is carried. So 9.3. Deputy, if you could have the chair, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Are there any speakers for item 9.3? It appears not. Someone to move the motion. Councillor Harris, thank you. A seconder. Councillor Spencer. Councillor Harris, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Briefly, we visited the site today at 11 Home Street, an internal block that has quite a steep upper portion and a lower portion that falls within the existing flood zone from the 1929 floods. What has been proposed as far as the 4-unit development is concerned addresses any of the concerns that I would have had in regard to the long-term viability of this particular development, in that the units on the lower side of the property are raised above the flood level that's required. The excavation that's required on the top part of the development will in fact allow access to garages, which is a clever use of the actual development. And I think whilst there is some talk about there being a landslip zone, it is mainly because of the steepness of the ground, and the building design is such that it's been able to cut into that bank in a convenient, in a way that I believe uses the planning scheme, and it's really up to the engineers as to how they will make sure that they don't cause any particular problems there as far as landslip or other goes. So I'm quite happy to encourage this sort of development. We will find more and more of this type of development where the blocks of land have been hard to develop on in the past, and as such now they will be perhaps subject to this type of scrutiny from us when we come to it, but that's because we're not making any more land, and we have to, I guess, find a way to make use of what is available where practical, and I believe in this case it's a very practical solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Spencer as the seconder.
Yep, I fully support this, and I agree with everything Councillor Harris has said. That is a really good block of land, and 4 new properties on that large block won't be overcrowded. So, and it's out of the flood zones the way it's proposed. Fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer. Any other contributions from around the table? Councillor Harris, do you wish to close?
Nothing further to add, Deputy Mayor.
Okay, we'll put the motion. All those in favour? That is all councillors around the table, noting that during the item Councillor Walker did exit. The motion is carried. Thank you. Now wait for the Mayor to re-enter. Back to you, Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy. We move on to 9.4, Meadow Street. Moved by Councillor Mackenzie, seconded by Councillor Harris. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Mackenzie?
Thanks, Mayor. I think we seem to have had one of these for the last 3 or 4 meetings, I think, in this particular area, and I guess the same sort of issues in regard to flood risk, traffic movements, etc., have sort of been raised again, and I would stand up to say what I said in each of those ones there is that the design of the area is to have buildings such as the ones that are going to be built on this area, on this block of land. Traffic management issues have been dealt with through traffic management studies, and further comments made by infrastructure people saying that the traffic management is not going to be an issue in the area, and the overall design is to sort of enable the flow of cars in and out of that site, which is a bigger site than that, and taken into consideration in regards to the matters that are there. And I guess the only thing that I've actually raised in the previous thing is that the developments have been with less trees than they've been required, and this is a nice unusual one that we're actually having more trees than are required, so I'm very pleased to support it.
Thank you. Councillor Harris?
Thank you. Not much more to add. As I said, these developments in these particular precincts have been coming forward. Interestingly, today the conversation was about the retention or what happens to the stormwater, because obviously we're creating more roof and hard stand areas with car parking, and the answer from the council officer was in fact that the development will in fact require some sort of detention basin to be built on site to hold the stormwater before it gets released back into the combined sewage system. So other than that, I had no other issues with this particular development. So,
thank you. Councillor Spencer?
Thanks, Mayor. Is it possible on this one to make that stormwater straight into the river? Is it put more problems onto our sewerage system?
Question?
Yes. Question.
To Director?
Shane.
General Manager?
Well, it's been assessed by officers as the most appropriate mechanism to deal with stormwater in this case, remembering that any penetration to our flood levy system actually lessens the integrity of our flood levy system, and also that, remember that in small rainfall events, all the stormwater collected by the combined system actually gets treated, whereas a separate system it won't do.
Thank you.
Would it be possible to actually put a clause in this one to say, that's what we thought when we were on the bus, that it was going to be drained straight into the river?
Well, that's not the officer's advice.
Right. Thank you.
Any councillors wish to speak to the item? Councillor Mackenzie wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. So 9.5, moved Councillor Mackenzie, seconded Councillor Harris. Wish to speak to it, Councillor Mackenzie?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, this is a site that we've visited before, I think, from one or two developments in the past, of which have been, I think, all put up for refusal. An interesting, challenging block in some ways in the way that where it sits in the landscape. It's obviously been subdivided off a block of land at some stage in the past, and it has an easement that sort of runs diagonally through the property, which makes it a bit more challenging from the fact of trying to find an appropriate building site. I think comments made this morning is that this development actually is a one-storey development. It's a reasonably large one spread across the site the best it can, which is it's needed to impact or close in on the side boundaries on a couple of the front boundary and the side boundary to the east or the north, which means it's closer than normally required, so this discretion is required in relation to it. Because of the way it's structured, the building will be dug into the ground and therefore require retaining walls, which was one of the other issues raised by the proponents of concerns against the integrity against their boundary. The actual retaining walls are likely to actually improve the integrity of the boundary and therefore prevent any sort of collapsing and any issues with the boundary the way that the design's got in there. And I think the fact that it's sitting lower on the block also reduces the scale and the height relative to the surrounding blocks. There's no doubt if you're in one of the 5 or 6 surrounding houses of that house, you're going to be able to see it. At the moment, you just see into a backyard. So the reality is there is going to be a visual impact, as there is when anybody builds something new on a site next to you which has got a vacant block of land. So the reality of it is there will be visual impact on the site. In my view, the site of it, and I think the comments made, is probably the best development we're actually going to get on there because it's actually quite low, and the fact that it sits into the bank is actually even going to lower the amenity of it. I can't say that people won't be visually impacted, but as we saw around the block, there are a couple of walls and things on blocks right next door to it, which I'm sure when they were first put up, people thought horror show, but after a few months, you just are there. So I think that's hopefully what the outcome's going to be for the neighbouring people, but I think the discretions that have been allowed in this particular DA are appropriate, and I think will give a good building development on a site that needs developing.
Thank you. Councillor Harris?
Only to follow on the good words of Councillor Mackenzie to say that there were 4 issues raised, and as he said, each of those issues had been addressed by this development. I haven't seen anything at this before, so it's obviously prior to my time on council, and I was actually impressed with the level of development that was being proposed. I think it makes a good outcome on a very difficult site, and whilst I'm sure there's at least one neighbour who will now notice a building over their back fence, other than that, I think it's a very worthy development, one that deserves our support. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer?
Totally agree with this one. This is a lot better than some of the ones we see in people's backyards with double stories. It's a single story, it's a great block, and it's on the southern side of the 2 people that were complaining, and technically it's built into the ground. I think it's a great outcome. Originally it was supposed to be 3 double-storey units on the northern end. That would have been looking into people's backyards, but this is a good project, so fully support it.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Just briefly, Mayor, I also rise to support the application before us, noting the 3 areas requiring council discretion, consideration for discretion, and obviously the major one referenced in the correspondence that we've had being setback and building envelope. Certainly acknowledge the words of Councillor Mackenzie with regard to the walls and the fact that they are greater than 9 metres, but I also think that this is a good outcome, and in terms of infill and the opportunity to positively impact an area that is changing, this is a great example of how to do it. And whilst there is going to be definite change and that change is going to be impacted, I do believe that the impact will not be so great as to affect the amenity for adjoining property owners, residents.
Thank you. Any others? Councillor Priest?
Yes, I acknowledge the other councillors' views on this development. I think it's a fantastic plan, extremely sympathetic to the site, and I think to the neighbours as well. I'd also like to acknowledge the fact that there will be appropriate car parking on the site, given the difficulties placed in regard to parking in Mulgrave Street, and I think it will be a lovely place for those people to live.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Mackenzie, wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. So we now no longer sit as a planning authority. Go to Mayor's announcements. There's just a few that I will mention. It was great on Wednesday the 15th to be part of other mayors around the region for the Waste Not Award ceremony, and I want to congratulate our staff very much. If you could pass that on, CEO, for the work that they've done very much in putting that together for Jess and the team. That's fantastic. They did a great job and amazing. It's always great to go and to be able to hear the different work that schools, individuals, people are doing, so businesses are doing, so really great. And it was great on Thursday the 16th, as long with the Deputy was there for the Youth Spectacular. We had a great night. They did an amazing job, the young people, so I don't know if you got to see it all on one of the times it was there, but it was fantastic to see the young people with their passion and their skill, just their music and the way they adjusted, even though the sound at times wasn't too good on that night, because they had a few hiccups with their PA, but it worked very well, so we thank them. Also, the Key to the City we obviously had last Friday, and I want to again thank our staff very much. Elizabeth did an amazing amount of work and it ran very well, so we appreciate the work that was done there from our staff CEO. Can I say on Saturday the 18th I didn't get to the bowls for the North Launceston season due to a mix-up, so that didn't happen. Then on Monday I just want to mention that I had a call from the Governor-General. We had a book call with the Governor-General of Australia, and he just wanted to pass on his thanks to the councils, to our council, all councils. He's going through the region to thank them for the work they've been doing the past 18 months in particular, and to say that he's very supportive. He's learning more and more the roles of councils, how they work in communities, and he thinks they play a very important part, and he wants you to know that, and he wants our staff to know that as well, and how great it is that we're thankful for our government, obviously he is too, for the way that we haven't been in lockdown like some of the other regions that he's talking to. So we had a good discussion, and I just wanted to pass that on, his thanks and his commitment to continuing to work together, and if there's a function here he would like to come in the not too distant future. That's it from myself. Councillor reports. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got 3 items that I'd like to share with the table. The first is on Saturday, had the pleasure of being involved with the Friends of QV Mag annual general meeting. It was wonderful to welcome more than 40 members. I know you'll find that in comparison to our AGM a very significant number, but the passion and commitment of the Friends who continue to support and advocate and raise funds for our QV Mag is certainly appreciated. And President Kay Dowling, together with the committee, have done an outstanding job this year, raising funds, garnering support, providing advocacy and indeed support to Dan and the team at the QV Mag during this time of transition. They were full of compliments, they were full of passion, and they look forward to continuing to serve us and the community with their support, their encouragement and their funds. So just wanted to reference the work of Kay and the team. Also wanted to mention, Mayor, it's a little out of the box and just very briefly, but I think it's important in the context of the world that we live in. On Saturday I also had the pleasure of attending the Chinese Teachers Association meeting here in Launceston, a time where the teaching of Chinese in schools in Tasmania, in northern Tasmania, is only growing as they continue to reach out and support one another and their Chinese friends around the world through experiencing what it is that Chinese culture can do, what it is that speaking Chinese Mandarin can do for improving the situation that we're in at the moment. And the numbers continue to grow, and the passion from those educators and many students who are also there and their families, the commitment to continuing to garner support and peace and understanding of China was so present in the room, and it was a credit to Louise and all of the organisers, and something that I think we'll continue to see grow into the future. And finally, I just wanted to reference that Theatre North, through the unsettling years, we're in the second one now, that they've had in terms of COVID, continue to present innovative small and large-scale programs. And one that has continued right throughout the difficulties of COVID has been the Conversations with Friends. And it was just wonderful last week to hear from long-term contributor to the arts scene, Pearl Treasure, who for her whole life, since the age of 3, has been involved in the fabric that is the arts sector here in the North. And it was lovely to hear of her experiences through a variety of theatres, a variety of theatre groups, the passion that exists, and to hear from fellow students that she's taught and inspired over the years. It was absolutely wonderful, and it was a credit to Theatre North and the Friends of Theatre North for staging that event.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thanks, Mayor. It leads nicely, and I think Deputy Mayor may have been one of those students. I think of Pearl, who is an absolute treasure to this community. But I actually just wanted to speak in my capacity as Theatre North, just noting that live theatre is up and about. It's been challenging this year of the number of cancellations that have been going on, and it's great to see our own local productions in that Marjorie Unravelled, which I know the Mayor and Deputy Mayor and I think Councillor Priest and I went to last week to celebrate something which was written locally, which was fantastic. But also noting that Bell Shakespeare here tomorrow night, and what's really significant about them, they actually went into the Northern Territory, went into the quarantine station where all the Olympians and everybody have gone to quarantine themselves, to enable themselves to take Bell Shakespeare on the road, which I think is a fantastic commitment from those young people and deserve the support of Launceston to go along tomorrow night. I'm sure there's still some great tickets available, so if you hadn't had the opportunity to book them, go out and book them. It'll be a nice little prelude before the grand final on Saturday. But also noting that coming up, Councillor Gibson well aware, Mamma Mia is coming up next month, and so there's a hell of a lot going on in the local production scene as well. So I just want to continually go out there. The art scene has struggled through the pandemic for live art and live support, but it's great that it's still alive and kicking here in Launceston, and there's some great local and national stuff that's coming to our theatres now. So please get out there and support it, because I know the people who work in the Theatre North box office and within the whole Theatre North project, they've worked really, really hard in extremely trying times over the last 18 months. And I think the best way we can support them is to put out our glad rags and buy a ticket and go and see something.
Thank you. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, to follow on from Councillor Mackenzie, yes, I have my tickets which were bought for I'll be out in the glad rags as Mamma Mia as well. But I will just mention a couple of other events I attended, including the civic reception for the Tas Leaders program, which just goes to show 15 years it's been running, turning out leaders in that whole time. It's a very well orchestrated program, and I congratulate the chairman of the board and Ange Driver and those who, including John Perry, who originally set it up. I think it's a great program. I also attended the Council Women's 5K run, which the Mayor participated in, but I was standing on the corner as a volunteer and didn't see too many of the other councillors here, but I would like to congratulate all 1,200 of the people who did run. I did attend the Waste Not Awards, and that's the second time I've done it. The first time I attended, I had my eyes open to what was happening, so much so that my Rotary Club then provided or asked for a grant and then introduced a small battery recycling program for which we won an award, and I had the honour of collecting at the ceremony on Wednesday. So I do encourage everyone who has the time to perhaps attend some of these things, because there's a lot of things going on in our community, and certainly in the waste area. We, I think here in Launceston, or in Northern Tasmania in general, are actually leading the state in so many ways. So I think that's a great outcome. And finally, I'd like to congratulate the Mayor for turning up for the MS Walk, Run and Roll out at Inverest in unbelievably poor weather on Sunday, when it blew a gale, poured with rain at times, and only 30 runners turned up to start, and we thought there's going to be no walkers. Well, over 100 walkers turned up at 10 o'clock, and the weather wasn't any better than what it was at 9 o'clock, I can tell you. But altogether, they raised more than $45,000 for the MS Society, which affects over 25,000 Australians. So it was a great day on Sunday, and I went home to have a nice warm bath and shower to wash it all back off again when I finished. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Councillor Spencer.
Thanks, Mayor. I went to the key to the city for Ariane Titmus and met her family. What a lovely lady she is. Also, at that function, I met a lady from Port Surreal that used to take Ariane Titmus to swimming at the motel a couple of times a week, and she told her when she was 7 years old, you could win a gold at the Olympics. It was so nice to see. The mayor's wife was there when she said it. Then I went to the 11th, I went to the grand final NTFA to see Bracknell beat South Launceston, and to have NTFA football back at UTAS was unbelievable. And everyone in the crowd, the players, absolutely loved it. So I'm glad that is happening. And I went to the Bracknell rooms after the game and walked in there, and the guy bought me a 20-ounce beer out. So, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. I did also want to back up your comments in regards to the organisation around the Key to the City presentation, the work that was done by council staff. I thought it was an excellent and really relaxed atmosphere that probably put Ariane Titmus at ease, but certainly put the other people involved in it at ease as well. So really well organised for something that was, I suppose, not controversial, but certainly unusual to be recognising a young woman the way that we have. But I certainly congratulate the organisation behind that. I did want to mention that in my capacity as the council representative on the Tamar NRM reference group, that I did visit recently with Tamar NRM to discuss their activities and also get a bit more information about the festival that they're organising very soon, the Sustainable Living Festival. So I thought I might just give that a plug. That's coming up on Saturday, October the 9th. I know that we'll probably have another council meeting before then, but it's a good chance to put it in your diaries now. It's out at Windsor Drive at the community precinct. I know it's outside of Launceston's bounds and all that sort of thing, but if you can see your way clear to going out there on Saturday, October the 9th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. to learn about, so many things. It's a festival they used to have at Albert Hall in previous years, and I'm sure many people have attended, and something that it's just going to be an ongoing conversation for us as a council and a community going into the future. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. If there's no other report, Councillor Priest.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to acknowledge Councillor Hugh Mackenzie. I attended the Northern Suburbs AGM on Monday. Was it Monday? Yeah, it was a fabulous AGM, and you do a fantastic job, Hugh, as President of the committee out there. I can't believe that you didn't just add that to your report.
I did think about it as I sat there.
Yeah. They have some amazing workers out there. It was fantastic to listen to the speakers speaking to their portfolios of their work in that space out there. It's an amazing building. They've got some lovely artwork on the walls out there with some affirmations attached to the artwork. Well worth going to have a look. Had a chance to chat with some other Tasmanian leaders and leaders in the community as well. I went to the opening of the IC Church in Cemetery Street with the Mayor, and that was a great opportunity to see in that space, that building. The conference centre is very impressive, to say the least. So that was really very enjoyable. I attended Marjorie Unravelled. That was an amazing play. Loved every minute of it. It was great to see many references to her home in Campbelltown. I too would like to acknowledge the ceremony held for Ariane Titmus. I particularly want to recognise the fact that I think it was a wonderful opportunity to see the older band members in our community standing up behind Ariane and the Mayor in their performance, and also the Green Berets from St Pat's School. That was an absolute highlight, and I just wish to see them again. I think I'll make the opportunity, if ever I hear that they're performing, to go and see them because they were absolutely amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. No further reports? Questions without notice from councillors? No? Oh, Councillor Spencer, sorry. Stand up, please.
My next door neighbour, I seen her over at the library this morning, and they mentioned about access to toilets after hours. But on the bus trip, we went to the new ones in West Patterson Street. All the answers are answered. It's a magnificent project what the council's done there.
Good.
So I should be able to go home, tap on my next door neighbours and say, go to the council, get yourself a 24-hour key, you've got access to toilets. Great effort.
Good. Thank you. Good reminder. Okay, no further questions? Committee reports? Cataract Gorge. Councillor Walker moved, seconded Councillor Harris. Just to speak to Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. I do. Meeting of the Cataract Gorge Reserve Advisory Committee held on the 17th of August. I do thank council officers in organising for the committee to hear from the organisers of Mona Foma 2022. At the moment, they are just workshopping ideas and plans, as no doubt people here and in the community would be aware. They've, in the previous 2 years, have held events there, and they've been hugely successful, and they certainly wish to continue that. And I appreciate the fact that they have approached the committee to discuss their ideas at this stage. I suppose not just ideas, but developing ideas. And certainly there's also some discussion on the committee in regards to different ways that we can share the knowledge base that is available when it comes to the Cataract Gorge, both flora and fauna. You know, something that anyone who enjoys their time at the Gorge would probably enjoy exploring as well. There are so many species, threatened species, different animals living there, and certainly a lot of understory plants that I'm not always familiar with, and I don't imagine most people are, but it's an important part of the natural values of the Gorge. And to that point, I suppose I would point people towards the Natural Values Atlas that the state government run, and on there you can find a lot of information regarding specific areas that you might have of interest of natural bush values in and around Launceston. But it's certainly something that the committee would like to see is to us to develop that shared knowledge and that knowledge base around the natural values of the Gorge, and to expand that and to record that, because there's various people, both Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal, who have a lot to share in that regard. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Harris. Any other councillor wish to speak to it? Can I put the motion then? Those in favour? That's all councillors present. That is carried. Move on to the audit panel meeting. Councillor Mackenzie moved. Seconded Councillor Walker. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor?
I do, Mayor. I think it just shows how busy we are when we get into the audit panel with all the things that we discussed at that meeting, not the least of which was welcoming Councillor Walker to that committee, and I hope he enjoyed the interface that he had in there. It's a lot of work goes on there, dealing with our internal processes and how to continually look at how we improve and make the council more efficient and effective in what it does. So I think there's a lot of work that goes on there, and the good interface between our internal auditors and our external auditors in regards to sort of doing that. And I thank the officers for the amount of work that goes into preparing for that particular meeting, because it's quite a lot of work, because there's a lot of reading that we have to do prior to those meetings. But I just wanted to highlight one matter which is not necessarily in there, but I'd just like to put a shout out to a couple of long-serving committee members, including our chair, Mark Scanlon, and Lyndall Kimpton, who get to the conclusion of their term about now. So unfortunately they can't renew because they're getting to the end term that they can do. So they've been a fantastic a couple of people to contribute to our committee over several years, and certainly I've enjoyed the interface with them and what they bring to that committee and the discussions we have about the finances and the activities within the financial realm of the council have been most valuable over that time. So certainly, I mean, we'll hopefully acknowledge them a little more formally later on, but certainly I'd like to acknowledge the work that they've done.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. And yes, it is true, I've joined the audit panel. Coming into council, I knew that it's an area that it is not an area that I'm well versed in, not being an accountant or having worked in any area vaguely like that. It's an area that I'd really like to improve my strength in, and I could tell being at that first meeting that certainly that will happen. Just being able to listen to everyone from the CEO to Paul and Louise and the way they operate there, of course, with those external auditors. I can't say that I understood everything. It's a challenge for most of us sometimes to get our heads around that fiscal policy and the different ways that accountants see the world. So nearly everyone else. Might include you in that, Mayor, I'm not sure. But certainly, yeah, I do appreciate that opportunity, and I look forward to spending some time on the committee. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Mackenzie, wish to close?
Just finally, I think, congratulations to Councillor Walker. I think it's good to take yourself outside your comfort zone and put yourselves into positions where you might not necessarily feel at home, because that's the only way we learn and develop. So congratulations for that. And I hope you learn we count more than just beans.
I will put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. That is all councillors present. That is carried. Pedestrian and Bike Committee, move Councillor Harris. Seconded Councillor Mackenzie. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Harris?
Very briefly, the Bike and Pedestrian Committee met under the chairmanship of Councillor Mackenzie, but I thought I'd give him a rest from having to stand up on each one. We did have some discussions about the Launceston Network Operating Plan, including identification and classification of pedestrians and bike routes, which was quite a useful discussion, as was looking at the Launceston City Heart Stage 2 project and the way that cycling will be able to make its way through that part of the city, even though there may not be designated cycle lanes through that part of St John Street. And just looking ahead, the bike and pedestrian count happened on Tuesday, so I'm sure that Nigel has that under control. It'll be interesting to see what the numbers were like. It was a cold morning, so to see if that affected it at all. And of course, Ride to Work Day is on Wednesday the 10th of November. Not a council meeting day, but I wonder how many people are going to ride to their work on the 10th of November. You've all been warned. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie wish to speak. Any other councillor wish to speak? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. So we move to 14.1, Council Workshop. Move Councillor Soward. Seconded Councillor Deputy Mayor Gibson. Councillor Soward, wish to speak?
Just very briefly, Mr Mayor, and I'll only speak on the first two items as I was an apology for the next two. I just wanted to give some feedback. In my time around the table, I would say those first two sessions, the blue sky session and the single-use plastics ban, would have been two of the most useful sessions I've ever attended. Particularly, I found the single-use plastics feedback from Hobart just fascinating. And I know when Councillor Dawkins, who brought that to the council and has obviously done a lot of work in that space, it was just amazing to hear, I guess, the challenges that Hobart had, the things that we're perhaps, I know I asked a couple of questions that I thought might have been problematic, but they indicated that they weren't. It was just a really, really good learning session. And I guess it's really valuable, I think, as a council, for us with anything we do. Of course, we're, innovative and we're creative. And as the late former Alderman Tony Peck used to say, he always used to talk about Launceston as a city of firsts. He always talked about that, and he had a big long list of firsts. It's really, really important too that we learn from other jurisdictions and the challenges they have, to learn from their mistakes, not that they made mistakes, but learn from their challenges and build on the successes. So just a bit of feedback. Thank you to all the staff who organised those, and the Blue Sky session. I thought it was a really, really good opportunity to explore people's ideas for the future of the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Happy
Any other councillor wish to speak? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. So we move on to 16.1, Myrtle Park fees and charges. Moved Councillor Spencer, seconded Councillor Harris. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Spencer? Councillor Harris?
I need to say that we'll be further considering under closed council who our operator may well be of Myrtle Park. But to do that, we need to set a fee, and the $20 per night was what it was last year, I should say. And but there will be an increase in number of sites from 20 to 30, I believe. So I think it's a fair and reasonable fee that will hopefully see the Myrtle Park area being used as a campsite for families, but also having some access during the daytime as well for those who go out there with a full-time caretaker on site.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. We know that Meadow Park is an important place for many people in Launceston municipality. People I know who take their families there every year, and maybe not last year during COVID, but you know, regular users. And I am really happy to see that that may long continue. I appreciate that there's, you know, sometimes difficulties with councils operating a facility such as this. So I'd encourage anyone who does use the park and who visits the park, you know, to be aware that it's very much a privilege for us to have this and to be able to offer it to our, well, not just Launceston, but anyone travelling in the region. And perhaps even to use something like Snap Send Solve if they see something that is untoward or something that's not right, something that needs repair. And we be vigilant as a community and really look after our resource the best that we can. And that will go a long way to helping the longevity, I think, of keeping Myrtle Park operating for a long time into the future.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Spencer, wish to close?
Yes, I take my caravan to Ulverston. It's normally $35, $40 a night for 2 people. I think $20 for 10 people is very, very, very cheap. I'd like to set a little bit more, but 10 people for $20 seems too cheap. So, thank you.
Thank you. You're closing. Well done. I'll now put the motion. Those in favour? And that is all councillors present. That is carried. We do move on to 18.1, the plaques and memorials. Move Councillor Dawkins, seconded Councillor Harris. Just to speak to it, Councillor Dawkins.
Yes, please. Council receives a number of requests for plaques and memorials each year, and this way we now have a policy around this, so we've got some structure in place. I think it's really important. I guess when I was reading this, the thought that kept coming to my mind is that life's for the living. You know, it's really important that we make sure our 248 parks are for people who are here with us and not to memorialise people or places, events from the past, but we do need to put aside some space for that to happen, and we need to do it in a methodical and orderly way where every single application is going to be judged on its merits and within the same parameters. So understanding, reading this report, that if somebody was to put an application in and they weren't to fit that criteria, there are other mechanisms for them to still have their, whether it's somebody in their family, somebody they admire, or a particular incident, to have that memorialised with a bench or a tree or some other manner. So I believe that the Manager for Parks and Sustainability will have the ultimate decision-making on the location. And I think that's important, that there's consistency. So when the manager might change, that consistency still remains. Yeah, I think, you know, I think there was some concerns around the development of the Plaque Memorial Park at Kings Park, which is what brought this on. You know, I want to make sure the community has been heard. There were a number of representations the last time we voted on an application for that space, and I do understand that people feel that it's becoming a very heavy space a space that it's a beautiful river frontage. You know, we spend a lot of time talking about how important Cunnamalooka River Tamer is to this community and what we want for its future, how we understand its past. And I think it's really important now that we use this policy to determine what future developments might take place there. So I thank the officers for this. We've been workshopped with it. I think we're all in approval for this policy, and I'd like to hear if anybody else has anything further to add.
Thank you. Question from the Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. It follows on from Councillor Dawkins, and definitely agree with everything that she said. At the workshop, we spoke about the register, specifically with regard to furniture and trees, and our desire was in some way to ensure that the register was kind of an open system where people could see and know and acknowledge what it was that had been donated to memorialise the person that had gone. So definitely appreciate that there, under installation and maintenance, it says the council will maintain a register of plaques, memorials and donated trees and park furniture. I guess I just need it to be explained to me. Does that mean we'll maintain in an open public way that particular register, or does that mean a closed document behind the scenes?
It would be intended that that's maintained on our website, so available to the public.
So certainly appreciating that, I'm wondering, would it be possible for us to include the word public register so that that can definitely occur?
Your views? You make it up. Yep.
Happy to make that change. Thank you. Appreciated.
Councillor Harris, you wish to speak to?
I will, because I'm not quite sure that I wasn't the one who started some of this, because I had a request for someone to wanted to put a seat in City Park, and when they went looking for the procedures, they found there wasn't any. And so from that, we now have a clear policy. I'm sure we did have the issues with what was going on in Royal Park, but I guess we had addressed those at an ad hoc basis. We now have a clear policy which sets out consistent guidelines, and I'm very pleased to see that because it does make it very clear and fair to everyone as to who exactly and when you can apply to have a plaque or a memorial, and whether that be on a piece of furniture. But if you took it to the nth degree, if everyone was just accepted on what was put in, the whole park would be full of chairs with people's names on it for whatever reason. And so it is really important that we do have a good bit of policy like this, and I do congratulate the officers who worked hard to come up with what is here, and I think it encapsulates everything that we need to do. And I guess on the public register, and looking with my Rotary hat on, we do have a number of Rotary seats and other assets in the city's parks, and one of our problems we have is actually identifying where they are and in fact who is maintaining them. So I do absolutely support the Deputy Mayor's suggestion of having a public register so that the Rotary Club and every other service club can then look and see exactly what it is they have put in the park over the years, because quite literally some of these things might have been there for 50 or 60 years, and the other clubs, the memory of those have since gone. So I think it's very important that we actually do have that so that people can understand it and then make arrangements to either maintain them, or if in fact they're going to be removed, what would happen with them as well, so they'd be aware of those things. So I think from that it's a really well-rounded policy, and happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie?
I think I was just randomly wandering my pen around.
Councillor Walker?
Thank you, Mayor. Question, if I could, first to the General Manager, Shane Everhart. A couple of councillors have alluded to a previous policy of council regarding Kings Park, no, Royal Park? Kings Park, it is Kings Park, and a previous iteration there where there's been a number of memorials put in there. How will this policy supersede that, or will it be adjunct to it?
So the previous, developments in Kings Park, there was a policy workshop with council, but it was actually never endorsed. So there is no endorsed policy around memorials in Kings Park. So this policy will apply going forward.
Do you wish to speak, Councillor?
Sorry, thank you, Mayor. I wish to speak now.
Thank you.
Certainly, hopefully, there will be an endorsed policy very soon. General Manager, And I do really like the idea of, encouraging people in the community to be able to sponsor various things. I know, it's mentioned here, park benches, things like that. I'm starting to think, drinking fountains, maybe rubbish bins. Like there's a couple of rubbish bins that I really appreciate around Launceston that are in really good locations. And, looking to the future, there's probably any number of things that we could incorporate into this policy and be a little bit creative with it. It's a great opportunity for the community to be somewhat involved in the work of the operational work of council. I fully appreciate that that's happened already, especially with service clubs and things like that. But I certainly see that this could be an area where the council could really increase that sense of ownership that the community has in conjunction with the council, which can only be a good thing.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Dawkins, you wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? That's all councillors present. That is carried. We move on to 18.2, Combined Drainage System. Move Councillor Mackenzie. Seconded Councillor Harris. Do you wish to speak to it? Yes.
I do, Mayor, because I'm probably one of about 4 or 5 of us that were here when the Taswater came into being, and I recall, I think somewhere in the vicinity of $5 or $6 million a year was touted by the then chairman of Taswater as what we should pay to service our combined water and sewage. So I'm very pleased to see that we actually have an appropriately well worked out set of numbers that we use to actually make contributions for, and the basis on which we're making them are all put into perspective. So I think it's terrific that that's done, and I'm quite supportive of the deal that's been put forward.
Councillor Harris. Any other councillor wish to speak to it? Councillor Walker.
Yeah, certainly there was also talk in the early days that the council might receive a dividend from water, and I know that this is contributions to our combined drainage system, based under the agreement that we have with Taswater for them to, maintain our drainage system. But is this agreement also bound in any way with future dividends that we might expect?
Nothing to do with dividends, and we will get dividends again, and we are getting them this year.
Thank you, Mayor.
2 million? Is it the amount?
You've got your CFO there.
Oh, he could answer that. Sure. How much?
2.7 million.
Sorry?
2.7 million if
There
we
we
get
go.
100%.
Sorry, I was
Taswater are looking to catch
Any
up.
other speakers? Councillor Mackenzie wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? That is all councillors present. That is carried. Audit panel 19.1, additional for the members and the extended time. Someone happy to move that? Councillor Mackenzie, second to Councillor Walker. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Mackenzie?
I did foreshadow this in my audit committee report meeting about Mark and Lyndall and their contribution over many years, and we do need to move to new membership, but we do need to have an audit committee in the meantime. So we're just seeking council's support to extend their appointments till the 30th of November to give us an appropriate amount of time to be able to go to market and seek some new members of that panel.
Thank you. Councillor Walker. Any other councillor wish to speak? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. That is all councillors present. That is carried. Can we have a motion that we go into closed council? Move Councillor Harris, second to Councillor Soward. And all those in favour? That's all councillors present. We'll go into closed council. Okay, we're back on. Thank you. Welcome back. We now need a motion to endorse the decisions taken in closed council. Councillor Sauer move, Councillor Harris second. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors present. That is carried. We'll close the meeting. Thank you.